Let's talk about neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to change itself. Most people think the brain changes passively over time or only in response to major life events. That's not true. The brain doesn't change by accident. It changes in direct response to focused, repeated effort, but not just any effort, high quality attention. It's not about how long you spend doing something. It's about how deeply you engage while doing it. Think of your brain like a landscape of electrical and chemical connections. Every time you think, act, or focus on something, you fire specific neural circuits. When you do that repeatedly with intensity and focus, those circuits get stronger. That's Hebbian learning. Neurons that fire together wire together. But here's the catch. Casual repetition doesn't do much. You can scroll your phone for 5 hours a day and not rewire anything meaningful. You might get better at scrolling, but you're not building long-term adaptable circuits. It's the quality of your attention that matters. Let's say you spend 1 hour a day in a highly focused state, working on a skill, solving a challenging problem, learning something new. During that window, your brain flags the experience as important. That sends a neurochemical signal, primarily involving acetylcholine and norepinephrine, that tells the brain, pay attention. This matters. Store this. These chemicals act like spotlight operators. They guide the brain's resources to the circuits being used most intensely. That's when plasticity kicks in. This process only works when you're fully engaged. That means eliminating distractions. No phone, no multitasking, no background noise. You're in a state of deep focus, sometimes called the task bracketing phase. In this state, your prefrontal cortex is active. You're not just reacting. You're driving attention deliberately. That's what tells the brain, this is not autopilot. This is growth mode. There's also a timing element. Plasticity happens best when there's a clear beginning, middle, and end to the focused effort. Your brain needs structure to recognize and encode the experience. If you allow your 1 hour of deep work to be bounded with a clear start and stop, you trigger the brain's consolidation processes. The changes made during the hour get locked in during rest and sleep. And here's something even more powerful. The harder the effort feels, the more the brain changes in response. Friction is a signal. When you struggle, when your brain says this is tough, that's when plasticity peaks. That's when BDNF, brain-directed neurotrophic factor, spikes. It's a molecular signal that supports the growth and survival of neurons. You can't get that from passive experience. You earn it through directed struggle. So if you want to change, learn faster, become more emotionally resilient, build new habits, it doesn't start with time. It starts with intensity. 1 hour of true, undistracted effort will beat 5 hours of passive repetition every time. The brain doesn't reward time spent. It rewards attention paid. The human brain is not optimized for multitasking. It's not designed to constantly switch between tasks, notifications, and shallow attention. When it comes to actual change, rewiring the brain, strengthening neural circuits, building skills, what matters most is uninterrupted, deliberate practice. Not effort that's spread thin across the day, diluted by distraction. 1 solid hour of focused work does more for your brain than 4 hours of scattered, half-engaged effort. Let's break down why that is. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and rewire, is governed by patterns. When you enter a focused state and sustain it, your brain begins to tag that experience as meaningful. That tagging process is mediated by neurochemicals like norepinephrine and acetylcholine. These act as spotlight markers. They tell your brain what's happening right now matters. Pay attention to these circuits. But that signal only gets loud enough when attention is continuous and deliberate. If you keep interrupting that signal, checking a text, jumping between tabs, half listening, those neurochemical markers stay weak. The brain doesn't commit resources to reinforcing those pathways. Now, think of deliberate practice. This is not just repetition. This is effort directed at the edge of your ability. It's when you're focused on improving a skill, refining a technique, solving a hard problem, or learning something that stretches you. That kind of effort is metabolically demanding. It activates specific regions of the brain: the prefrontal cortex, motor cortex, hippocampus, depending on what you're doing. And when those regions are engaged without interruption, they start to undergo structural change. Synapses strengthen, myelin sheaths thicken. That's plasticity in action. But when you chop that effort into bits across the day, 10 minutes here, 15 there, you're forcing your brain to reset each time. It takes time and energy to get back into a high focus state. Studies on attention show it can take upwards of 20 minutes to regain full cognitive intensity after a distraction. So if you keep stopping and restarting, you're never truly building momentum. You're just spinning your wheels. One uninterrupted hour, on the other hand, creates a different effect. You cross into what's often referred to as the deep work state. This is where the brain stops reacting to the outside world and begins building internal coherence. Activity synchronizes. You move from conscious struggle into unconscious efficiency. And it's in this deep state where plasticity becomes not only possible, but optimal. Another layer here is memory consolidation. When you engage in continuous practice, you create a complete learning arc, beginning, middle, and end. That pattern is crucial for the brain to process and store the experience during rest. If your learning is fragmented, the brain doesn't know what to consolidate. So if you want to rewire your brain effectively, whether to master a skill, reshape a habit, or train emotional control, go for intensity over frequency. Protect 1 hour, no breaks, no interruptions, just full immersion. That's when the real changes happen. That's when the brain rewires. We often separate the brain from the body as if cognition happens in one place and movement in another. But the reality is they're deeply integrated. Physical movement isn't just about muscles or metabolism. It's one of the most powerful tools for enhancing brain function. 1 hour of deliberate, intense physical activity doesn't just transform your physiology. It sharpens your cognition, stabilizes your mood, and builds emotional resilience at a neural level. Here's what happens when you move with intent. You activate multiple brain systems simultaneously. The motor cortex fires to control movement, the cerebellum fine-tunes coordination, and the basal ganglia regulate rhythm and pattern. This neural crosstalk increases the efficiency of brain signaling overall. But it's not just about motor control, it's about neurochemistry. With sustained movement, your brain begins releasing key neuromodulators, dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins. These are not just feel-good chemicals. They regulate attention, motivation, mood, and stress response. Let's focus on dopamine for a second. Dopamine is central to motivation and drive. When you engage in challenging physical activity, especially something like running, resistance training, cycling, or high-intensity intervals, dopamine levels rise in areas of the brain linked to goal pursuit and effort. That increase sharpens focus and builds what's called effort-based reward circuitry. In other words, your brain starts to associate hard physical work with internal reward. That association helps train you to lean into challenge, not avoid it. Exercise also boosts brain-directed neurotrophic factor, BDNF. This molecule acts like miracle grow for your neurons. It supports the growth of new synapses and protects existing ones. 1 hour of physical activity significantly increases BDNF in key brain regions like the hippocampus, which is critical for learning, memory, and emotional regulation. So when people say movement makes you smarter, that's not motivational fluff, it's biology. But there's another layer, emotional regulation. Physical exertion triggers the release of endocannabinoids, compounds that cross the blood-brain barrier and reduce anxiety. They create a natural calming effect without sedation. This is one reason why a workout often leaves you feeling mentally clearer and emotionally balanced. Over time, consistent training changes your baseline state. Your resting levels of anxiety go down. Your ability to stay calm under pressure goes up. That's because regular exercise recalibrates the autonomic nervous system. You gain better control over your fight or flight response. You don't just feel stronger, you become more resilient. This isn't about being an athlete. This is about using your body to train your brain. 1 hour a day, walking with pace, lifting with focus, moving with challenge, activates a system-wide upgrade. Your cognition sharpens, your mood becomes more stable, your stress response becomes more flexible. You become more focused, more driven, and harder to knock off course. So if you're looking for a single lever to pull, something that hits mental, emotional, and physical performance all at once, movement is that lever. 1 hour daily with intention. That's not just exercise. That's neural training. Most people try to avoid discomfort. We're conditioned to seek ease, convenience, and comfort. But the nervous system doesn't grow in comfort. It adapts through challenge. When you intentionally place yourself in controlled discomfort, whether it's through intense exercise, cold exposure, or breath work, you're not just building mental toughness. You're training your nervous system to become more stable, more responsive, and more capable under real-world stress. Let's start with what stress actually is. Stress is a physiological response. Heart rate spikes, breathing changes, cortisol rises, and your brain shifts into a survival mode. These reactions are automatic, driven by the autonomic nervous system, particularly the sympathetic branch. It's ancient and hardwired. The problem is, in modern life, this system is often triggered by things that aren't life-threatening. Emails, social tension, deadlines. Over time, this leads to chronic activation and burnout. But here's where deliberate discomfort becomes a tool. When you voluntarily enter a stressful state in a safe and controlled environment, you give your nervous system a unique opportunity. It learns how to enter and exit stress more effectively. Take cold exposure as an example. Plunging into cold water immediately activates the sympathetic response. Your heart rate jumps. But if you stay calm, deliberately regulate your breath, keep your focus, you're teaching your body that stress doesn't have to equal panic. Over time, your system becomes more flexible. You build what's called autonomic control. This applies to intense exercise as well. During a hard workout, your body enters a stress state. Lactic acid builds, muscles fatigue, breathing intensifies. But if you maintain form, control your breath, and stay focused through that discomfort, you're reinforcing a crucial signal. I can stay calm under load. That signal rewires your response to future challenges, not just physically, but emotionally. Breath work is another direct line into this system. Certain breathing protocols, like cyclic hyperventilation followed by breath holds, mimic the internal experience of panic or stress. But because you're choosing the stressor, you gain a level of control. You become fluent in the language of your own nervous system. You're no longer just reacting. These practices build what's known as stress resilience. It's not just a concept, it's measurable. Over time, people who train with deliberate discomfort show lower resting cortisol levels, higher heart rate variability, and faster recovery from stress events. Their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision making, stays more active under pressure. They don't shut down, they stay online. So discomfort, when chosen with intention, becomes a form of training. You don't wait for stress to find you, you prepare for it. And when it does arrive, because it will, you respond from a place of readiness, not reactivity. 1 hour a day of this kind of practice can change how your entire system operates. Not just stronger, not just calmer, but more adaptive, more capable, built for the real world. Dopamine is often misunderstood. Most people associate it with pleasure, winning, rewards, that sense of feeling good. But in reality, dopamine's primary role isn't to make you feel pleasure. Its real job is to drive pursuit. It's the molecule of motivation, and when properly activated, it wires your brain to seek challenge, not avoid it. This is key to building effort-based behavior, and it's how you can train yourself to want hard things. Here's how it works. When you engage in something difficult, something that requires real effort and full attention, dopamine levels begin to rise. But this only happens in a meaningful way when your brain sees the struggle as valuable. That's the feedback loop. If you push through discomfort, resist quitting, and stay focused, your brain starts linking dopamine not just to the outcome, but to the effort itself. That rewires motivation. You start to enjoy the process, not just the reward. The nucleus accumbens and the ventral tegmental area, two key parts of the brain's reward circuitry, track effort and expectation. When you pursue a difficult goal and make progress, even small progress, dopamine is released in these areas. That release creates a reinforcing signal. This effort is worth it. Do it again. Over time, with repetition, this becomes a loop. You work hard, dopamine rises, the brain tags that effort as meaningful, and motivation increases. Now, this doesn't happen with passive tasks. Scrolling your phone, watching random videos, snacking. Those also spike dopamine, but in a very different way. Those spikes are shallow and short-lived. Worse, they create a baseline drop afterwards, making you feel less motivated, less focused, and more distracted. That's why effortless rewards actually erode your drive over time. What you want is effort-driven dopamine. That happens through challenge, pushing yourself in training, learning a difficult skill, staying locked in on a task that demands full engagement. When you do this consistently, the dopamine system begins to adapt. Your brain becomes more efficient at releasing dopamine in response to internal effort rather than external rewards. That's intrinsic motivation, and it's a biological shift, not just a mindset. And here's the important part. The steeper the challenge, the greater the potential dopamine response if you pursue it willingly. That's why voluntary hardship, exercise, cold exposure, focused work is so powerful. It activates the brain's motivational machinery without needing a trophy at the end. You start to crave the work because your brain learns to associate struggle with internal reward. This is how high performers sustain momentum. They're not relying on constant wins or external validation. They've trained their system to link effort to reward. That's a loop you can build. 1 hour a day, locked into something difficult, something that stretches you. That's enough to start rewiring the dopamine system, and once it shifts, everything changes. You stop chasing comfort. You start chasing growth. And the best part, it starts to feel good. Not easy, but good. Because the effort becomes the reward. We live in a world that encourages skimming. Quick text, fast videos, short captions. Our brains are being trained to process shallow information at high speed. But that comes at a cost. We lose the neural depth required for complex thinking, problem solving, and creativity. One of the most powerful ways to reverse this is through deep reading or structured learning. Done for just 1 hour a day, without distraction, that single hour, when done consistently, literally rewires your brain for depth, focus, and resilience in the face of complexity. Let's look at what's happening under the surface. Deep reading isn't passive. It's one of the most cognitively demanding things you can do. When you read a complex book or engage in focused study, you activate multiple neural systems at once. Language processing, memory retrieval, abstract reasoning, even visual imagination. This broad network engagement drives something called functional connectivity. Your brain gets better at integrating information across different regions. That's the basis of critical thinking. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, analysis, and decision-making, gets stronger when you consistently engage it with deep learning. And unlike passive content consumption, which mostly engages superficial attention circuits, deep reading sustains activation in these regions for extended periods. That repeated activation strengthens synaptic connections, increasing your ability to manage abstract and layered information in the real world. But there's more. When you push yourself to understand dense material, philosophy, neuroscience, literature, complex nonfiction, you're doing more than absorbing facts. You're training your brain to hold multiple ideas at once, to resolve ambiguity, to detect nuance. This is a rare skill in today's environment, but it's trainable. And the key is depth over speed. That's why 1 hour a day matters. In that hour, the brain enters a state of deep focus. Distractions fade, attention becomes sustained. And when that happens, neurochemicals like acetylcholine are released, which flags specific neural circuits for change. This is how learning becomes physical. You're not just remembering, you're remodeling your brain. There's also a downstream effect. Deep reading trains what's called cognitive endurance, the ability to stay with a problem, sit with uncertainty, and not break focus when things get difficult. That transfers to everything else you do, how you handle stress, how you make decisions, how you communicate. And here's the critical piece. Consistency matters more than intensity. 1 hour a day, every day, compounds. The brain responds to repetition, not occasional overload. If you give it depth consistently, it adapts. Your baseline attention improves. Your tolerance for complexity expands. You become less reactive and more deliberate in how you think and respond. So if you're looking to sharpen your mind, build mental resilience, and stay effective in a noisy world, carve out 1 hour for deep learning, not scrolling, not scanning, studying. That hour doesn't just fill your mind, it forges it. One of the most underestimated drivers of personal transformation is identity. Not just what you do, but who you believe you are becoming. And identity isn't something you simply decide in your head. It's built through repeated actions that signal to your brain, this is who I am now. When you ritualize 1 hour a day for focused self-development, whether through movement, learning, deliberate discomfort, or deep work, you begin to hardwire a new identity, one rooted in discipline, growth, and self-directed evolution. Here's what's happening neurologically. Every behavior you repeat strengthens neural pathways tied not just to the action itself, but to your self-pemure. The brain tracks consistency. If you show up daily for something difficult, even when motivation is low, you're sending powerful input to your limbic system and prefrontal cortex. I am someone who does hard things on purpose. Over time, that belief becomes reflexive. It's not a mantra. It's not theory. It's neurobiological evidence built through repetition. Ritual is the structure that supports this transformation. Unlike a routine, which is often automatic and mechanical, a ritual has intention. It's designed. It signals to the brain that what's about to happen matters. When you start the hour the same way every day, same place, same setup, same mindset, you engage systems in the brain responsible for pattern recognition and anticipation. Dopamine levels begin to rise before the work even starts. That anticipation enhances motivation and primes focus. But here's the key. By protecting that hour with ritual, you're not just building habits. You're reorganizing your time around a single, meaningful signal. Growth is a priority. That shift becomes your anchor in a world full of noise and distraction. You begin to move differently, think differently, and over time, you begin to expect more from yourself, not out of pressure, but because the evidence of your own consistency is impossible to ignore. This has downstream effects on emotional regulation, decision-making, and even how you process setbacks. When you consistently show up for your own evolution, your baseline self-trust increases. You stop negotiating with your goals. You stop outsourcing your identity to external validation. You become the kind of person who takes action not because it's easy, but because it aligns with who you are. And identity is sticky. Once your brain locks onto a self-picture, it begins filtering behavior and opportunities through that lens. You'll find yourself making better choices without needing willpower, simply because they match the person you believe you are. That's the real reward of the daily hour. It's not just what you achieve during it. It's the long-term shift in how you see yourself and what becomes possible as a result. So protect the hour, not as a task on a checklist, but as a sacred contract with your future self. Over time, it becomes the cornerstone of a new identity, one that's grounded, focused, and intentionally built. One that doesn't depend on mood, motivation, or circumstances. Just 1 hour a day, done with purpose. That's how you evolve from the inside out. So what does it come down to? 1 hour, not a massive overhaul, not waiting for the perfect time, just one intentional, focused hour a day, repeated consistently, protected fiercely, and directed toward growth. That single hour, when chosen with purpose, becomes a gateway to rewiring your brain, reshaping your body, recalibrating your stress response, and ultimately redefining who you are. You're not just managing time. You're training attention, building discipline, reinforcing effort, and anchoring identity. You're teaching your nervous system to seek challenge, your brain to crave depth, and your mind to lead rather than follow. This isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters and doing it like it matters. The compound interest of that daily hour is undeniable. In weeks, you feel the shift. In months, you see the results. And in time, you become the kind of person who doesn't just hope for change, you embody it. It's not magic, it's biology, and it's available to anyone willing to claim the hour.